Welcome to Module 6, everyone. You're almost about halfway through your semester of logic and critical thinking. Great work. We are now going to turn to the evaluation of arguments. We just learned 5 types of deductive arguments in the last 2 modules. We will use those deductive arguments now and think further. How can we know if they're good? If they are arguments that we should accept. In logic and critical thinking, we have terms. Think of this as a game. I'm going to give you terms and I'm going to show you the rules. We have steps that you go through to evaluate the deductive arguments, and there are rules for how you move through those steps. So try to think of this as a game. Write down the terminology. The process is going to be the same. After our first exam, after the midterm, you're going to learn about a bunch of inductive arguments. And then you'll also learn how to evaluate those. The process of evaluating any argument is the same, but the terminology is different between deductive and inductive. For right now, I only want you to worry about deductive. That's all we've learned so far. So the terms are validity and soundness. What does that mean? First, we ask, is the argument in good form? Is it put together well such that if the premises were true, would the conclusion have to follow? And then after we say yes or no there, we say, are the premises true? Okay, because someone could present a really great argument to you, and it might seem like something you should accept. It might be formed beautifully. But if you find out later that one of the premises were false, or the person was lying to you about the premises, what does that do? The argument falls apart. It's called unsound. So the terms we use, again, write these down, come back to this video. The only thing we're spending time on in this module is validity and soundness. So it's extremely important that you get the meaning of those terms as they're applied to deductive argumentation. Let's get started on a few examples. Validity. The first step, we ask for validity. Is an argument in good form? Are the premises going in the correct order such that if they were true, the conclusion would have to follow? Once we've determined something is valid, then we go on to step 2 and we ask, okay, I've determined this argument was formed well. Now I have to see, are those premises really actually true? Can I verify them? Can I figure out whether they're true or not? And in this class, I won't ask you to verify everything. You're not having to do a bunch of research. I'll tell you if premises are true or false, or I'll say assume they're false or assume they're true. But what I'm having you try to do is go through the process, the game of evaluation. So let me give you a couple of examples. Okay, if I've found an argument that's a good form, I go to the second step. If I don't, I can stop right there. If an argument's in poor form or invalid, it is automatically unsound. Again, I'm going to give examples. Think of validity and soundness kind of like that sponge and panning, but mainly the panning. Once we found out that something is valid, that we should think more about it, we have to go further to verify truth. That's called soundness, like gold panning. We have to dig deeper. We have to sort through stuff to figure out if premises are true or false. Let's go back to this great slide of this wonderful gorilla and the argument for all philosophy professors being really wicked smart. By the way, ask yourself if you remember, what kind of deductive argument is that? It's a categorical syllogism. So if I say all professors are wicked smart, Cassandra is a philosophy professor, Cassandra is wicked smart, you're going to go to step one. What was step one? Is this a valid form? So I don't want you to worry about whether this is true, these things are true or not. Right now, just ask yourself, if these things were true, would the conclusion have to follow? And what do you think the answer is? Yes, it's valid. If those premises were true, then the conclusion would follow. That makes it valid. That means I have to go to step two and ask the next question. Right up here, what is it? It's soundness. Okay, how do I figure out soundness? Are all of the premises true? Well, you know I'm a philosophy professor, so that's true. Are all philosophy professors wicked smart? I could tell you I've met a couple that are not. So if I tell you that one of the premises is false, what happens? The argument is still valid because it's gone through the proper form, but now it's what? It's unsound. If I say, for instance, yeah, premise one, I can't say that, or maybe I know someone who's not wicked smart, who is a philosophy professor, then that makes this unsound because I found one premise that's false. Let's do make this highlighted so you understand. Right here as it is, if I told you all of those things are true, then this is valid and sound. But you know, out of all the people in the world that are philosophy professors, there could be one that's not so smart. So in real life, if I tell you premise one is actually false, then this is unsound. Again, as we analyze arguments, you want to just have these rules here. Step one is validity and the form. Step two is if it's valid, can I figure out if the premises are true? If they are all true, then it's sound. Validity, soundness. Okay, let's see if we can do another example. Oh, here's one that you might know. Maybe you recognize this face. This is a picture of William Macy. William Macy's an actor on a very famous show. He plays someone who's struggling with drugs and alcohol. Here's an argument. If Frank Gallagher had 2 shots of whiskey today at the bar, then he had another 8 shots of whiskey, and I conclude Frank had 13 shots of whiskey in total today at the bar, I want you to ask yourself, okay, I'm going to go through the steps. The rule of the game is 1, I ask about form. And then 2, if the form is good, then I ask about truth. So let's see what happens when you do that. By the way, what kind of argument is this? 2 plus 8 equals 13. Don't worry about the fact that that's not proper math. I gave it away. It's an argument from math. It's a deductive argument from math. But what do we know? 2 plus 8 does not equal 13. So when we ask about validity, if there's proper form, then the conclusion has to follow from the premises. What's going on here? It seems like there's proper form, but this conclusion doesn't follow. We can't have a false conclusion after 2 true premises. That means what? That means it's invalid. This is not a good form. It's invalid because 2 plus 8 should not end up with 13. That's not how math works. Okay? So go back to the steps and the rules, and again, pretend like you're playing a game. We're playing the game of evaluating deductive arguments. If it's invalid, the form is bad. Okay? You can stop right there. Anything that's invalid is automatically unsound. But when you find something that's valid, you have to go to step 2 and figure out soundness. Okay? We could have valid but unsound arguments. So arguments that are in good form but that have false premises. Let's make this a valid argument. Frank had 2 shots of whiskey, then he had another 8. He had 10 shots. So that means this is a valid argument. I've made it valid. Does that mean that it's sound? You don't know until I tell you the truth value. If I tell you that one of those premises is actually false, the argument is still valid, but it's what? It's unsound. Okay, here is a way to figure that out. I have just told you that premise 2 is actually false. Argument is still valid because if it were true, the conclusion would necessarily follow. It's a well-formed argument. However, I just told you premise 2 is false. Therefore, the argument is unsound. Watch this video maybe a couple times. Write down the rules and the steps. Make sure that you pay attention to them when you're taking quiz and exam. It's a little tricky. Only these 2 words, but their application and the rules are very important as we go forward. Okay? Have a great week. I will see you soon. And bye to Frank.